At 12:41 in the morning on March 8, 2014, a Malaysia Airlines Boeing 777 lifted off from Kuala Lumpur International Airport, bound for Beijing. 227 passengers were on board, along with 12 crew. The night was calm. The flight was routine. There was nothing about flight MH370 that suggested anything unusual was about to happen. 38 minutes later, it vanished. Not slowly. Not with a distress call or a warning or a final radio message describing trouble. One moment the plane was a blip on air traffic control screens over the South China Sea, tracking normally toward Vietnamese airspace. The next moment, it simply was not there. More than a decade later, investigators still cannot say with certainty what happened to Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. It remains the greatest unsolved mystery in the history of commercial aviation. A case with no confirmed wreckage site, no recovered black box, and no agreed explanation, despite the largest search effort ever mounted for a missing aircraft. The aircraft itself was a Boeing 777-200ER, one of the most reliable long-haul planes ever built. It had flown for more than 53,000 hours without a major incident. It had passed a routine maintenance check just 2 weeks earlier. There was no mechanical red flag, no history of trouble, nothing in its service record that investigators could point to as a warning sign. To understand how a 200-ton aircraft can disappear in the modern world, you first need to understand what actually happened that night, because the plane did not vanish all at once. It vanished in stages, and each stage made the mystery deeper. The last routine communication from the cockpit came as the plane crossed from Malaysian airspace into Vietnamese airspace. A voice, believed to be the co-pilot's, said, "Good night, Malaysian 370. It sounded completely normal. There was no hint of distress in it. Almost immediately afterward, the plane's transponder, the device that broadcasts a plane's identity, altitude, and speed to air traffic control, stopped transmitting. Around the same time, the aircraft's separate reporting system, which sends engineering data back to the airline, also went quiet. Investigators later concluded that both systems had been disabled deliberately rather than failing on their own. To the controllers watching their screens in Kuala Lumpur, the plane had simply gone dark. What happened next is where the case turns from a communications failure into something far stranger. Malaysian military radar, which does not rely on the transponder, kept tracking an aircraft matching MH370's signature, and that aircraft was not continuing toward Beijing. It had turned. It flew back across the Malay Peninsula, out over the Strait of Malacca, and then up toward the Andaman Sea, a route that took it hundreds of miles away from its filed flight plan, through a region where multiple countries' militaries were watching their airspace and somehow did not intervene. Then it disappeared from radar entirely off the northwestern tip of Malaysia. For a week, investigators believed that was the end of the trail. Then came a detail that reopened the entire case. A satellite operator named Inmarsat announced that the aircraft had kept sending faint, automatic hourly signals to one of its satellites for nearly 7 hours after radar lost it. Signals that carried no data about location, but that could be used mathematically to calculate how far the plane had been from the satellite at each hourly ping. Those 7 pings, stretched across nearly 7 hours, meant one thing above all else. MH370 had kept flying long after anyone had lost track of it on enough fuel to cross an ocean. Using the angle and timing of those signals, investigators calculated 2 enormous possible paths. One arcing north over Asia toward Kazakhstan, the other arcing south into the emptiest stretch of the Indian Ocean. The northern route was eventually ruled out. It would have taken the plane through heavily monitored airspace without being seen, and no country along that path reported anything. That left the southern arc, thousands of miles from land, in one of the most remote stretches of ocean on Earth. On March 24, 2014, more than 2 weeks after the plane vanished, Malaysia's Prime Minister told the world that MH370's flight had ended in the southern Indian Ocean. There were no survivors. For the families waiting in Beijing and Kuala Lumpur, those 2 weeks had already been an agony of shifting information. Search planes spent days combing the South China Sea based on the plane's last known position, before investigators revealed that military radar had tracked it heading the opposite way entirely, forcing the search to restart in a completely different part of the map. Every update seemed to widen the mystery rather than close it. What followed was the most expensive search in aviation history. Ships and aircraft from more than 24 countries combed the surface. Submersibles and sonar-equipped vessels later scoured tens of thousands of square miles of ocean floor, some of it more than 4 kilometers deep, terrain that had never been mapped in that kind of detail before. It found shipwrecks. It found geological features nobody had named. It did not find the plane. In July 2015, 17 months after the disappearance, a piece of winged debris called a flaperon washed ashore on Réunion Island, off the coast of Madagascar. It was confirmed to have come from MH370. Over the next 2 years, dozens more fragments turned up on beaches across the western Indian Ocean and the coast of Africa. Enough to prove the plane had gone down somewhere in that ocean, but not enough, even with detailed drift analysis working backward from where and when they washed ashore, to pinpoint exactly where. The underwater search was suspended in January 2017, after covering some 120,000 square kilometers of seabed without success. A second privately funded search using different methods and a narrower target area ended the following year, also without success. As of the most recent public statements from Malaysia's government, officials have said they remain open to a new search if credible new evidence emerges, but no wreckage has ever been recovered and no black box has ever been found. Without a wreck, without a black box, and without a single distress call, investigators have been left to work backward from a very small set of facts, and that gap has been filled with theories, some more credible than others. One line of investigation focused on the crew. The captain, Zahari Ahmad Shah, was found to have used his personal flight simulator weeks before the flight to plot a route into the southern Indian Ocean, broadly similar to where the plane is believed to have gone down. Investigators reviewed the financial records and recent behavior of both pilots and found no signs of unusual stress, debt, or planning consistent with a premeditated act, according to Malaysia's own report on the crew, though the simulator data has never been fully explained and remains one of the most debated pieces of evidence in the entire case. Other theories focused on the passengers, including 2 men found to be traveling on stolen passports, who were investigated and eventually cleared of any connection to hijacking or terrorism. Mechanical theories, a fire, a sudden depressurization, a catastrophic system failure, have also been explored, though none of them easily explain why the plane's tracking systems went dark and why it then flew on a coherent course for hours afterward. No theory has been proven. Every one of them has holes. That, more than anything, is what makes MH370 different from other lost aircraft. It is not a mystery of no evidence. It is a mystery of evidence that points in several directions at once, none of them conclusive. Even the search itself has become part of the puzzle. Different drift models, built from ocean current and wind data, have pointed to different patches of seafloor as the most likely resting place. Each new model has been used to argue for resuming the hunt in a slightly different location, and each time the search has come up empty. In recent years, some researchers have turned to an unconventional method, analyzing disruptions in amateur radio signals that circle the globe, on the theory that a large aircraft passing through a signal's path could leave a detectable trace. It is an unproven technique, but it reflects how far investigators have had to reach for new leads after the conventional ones ran out. 239 people were on that plane. Engineers, students, an artist, a construction worker, families traveling together, a group of calligraphers heading home from an exhibition. Their disappearance did not end with an explanation or a memorial service marking a known cause or a court case naming who was responsible. It ended with an ocean and a handful of broken parts that washed up years later on beaches, thousands of miles from where anyone had been looking. Somewhere in the deep water southwest of Australia, or somewhere no one has searched at all, the rest of the aircraft is still down there. The data that would explain everything, the flight recorders, the cockpit voice recorder, the last hours of the flight, is sitting in the dark, in pressure and cold, waiting for someone to find it. 10 years on, that is still where the story ends, not with an answer, with an ocean that has kept its secret longer than anyone thought possible.